All right, so here's the story in the New York Times, and it's a very distinctive tone, very distinctive reporting. As the president contest enters the final sprint, campaign aides and allies close to Vice President Harris are growing cautiously optimistic about her chances of victory, saying the race is shifting in her favor. So two key things in the first paragraph. They're growing cautiously optimistic, suggesting they weren't cautiously optimistic before, or at least not as much. And they claim the race is shifting in her favor. Not that it's a tie, not that she's the underdog, but that things are shifting her way. Top Democratic strategists are increasingly hopeful that the campaign's attempts to cast Donald Trump as a fascist, paired with an expansive battleground state operation and strength among female voters, still energized by the end of federal abortion rights, will carry Harris to a narrow triumph. Even some close to Mr. Trump worry that the push to label him a budding dictator who has praised Hitler could move small but potentially meaningful numbers of persuadable voters. Now, that last point, I'm not sure is true in the sense that most of the people I talk to in Trump world don't think this issue will work, but you can find some who do that, and the New York Times has paired that. So you get, in the first two paragraphs, you get Democrat rising optimism that abortion rights turnout operation and Trump as unhinged and as a fascist, paired with what happened last night, means things are moving her way. Next graphic, please. Second two paragraphs of the story. Officials within the Harris campaign and people with whom they have shared candidate assessments believe she remains in a solid position in the northern blue wall states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, saying internal polling shows her slightly ahead in all three, though by as little as half a percentage point. So small leads, but she's got leads and she's got the better turnout operation, so she's going to win. They think she remains competitive across the four Sun Belt battleground states. Arizona and North Carolina appear to be the toughest swing states for Ms. Harris, these Democrats said, and they feel better about Georgia and Nevada. All right. Take that down. Let's bring in Celinda and Mark and Fred if he's here. Celinda, how do you read that story as a sophisticated reader of political stories? How did the New York Times, do you think, come to write that?
Well, I think it's the New York Times trying to make headlines again. I mean, there's a long history here, right, of the New York Times and every other newspaper and media outlet. When the polls change a percentage point, they go, the polls changed a percentage point. Now so-and-so's in the lead and it's all margin of error. Or African-American men are collapsing for Harris and it's, 164 cases and it's a 10-point drop. So it's just part and parcel of trying to make news. I mean, I think this race is as close as it can be. I think there will be a surge of Trump voters and a surge of Harris voters. And all of the states are within margin of error. And anybody who tells you that they know who's going to win is either a soothsayer or a witch, because nobody knows what's going to happen.
All right. Fred Davis, Republican strategist. How do you read that New York Times story? How does that turtle get on that fence post?
I sort of chuckled at that story this morning. I agree 100% with Celinda. I wasn't at the Madison Square Garden event. I read the same stories everyone else did. But from a Trump standpoint, it was arguably a big, successful, glowing thing. Though I don't have it in front of me, but there was a quote in that article. It was just a classic on the New York Times spin on the same story that I was reading all these good notes about. Otherwise, I can't call it. I'm sure Mark can't call it. We don't know who's going to win any more than anybody else does. I think they're probably meaning Harris, probably doing a pretty good job playing their hand that they have and trying to show some optimism. I thought she sounded really good at the base of the stairs of that airplane. Yep. It wasn't word salad or anything.
Yeah.
If she'd sounded like that the whole way, I don't think this would be a close race, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. So, Mark, you're very sophisticated about this stuff. My view is the Harris folks decided they needed to go on offense, because I talked to a lot of reporters. I talked to a lot of people in politics, a lot of lobbyists, a lot of members of Congress, and there was some glumness setting in the Democratic side. And again, I don't know if they planted that New York Times story by calling them up, but that New York Times story doesn't change the paradigm completely. But between their dominance of the narrative of the Madison Square Garden, some really good new ads, her event tomorrow night, her performance on the steps of the plane, and that story, I think they're pushing people back towards not Trump's moving up in the national polls and probably the state polls, but back to coin flip, which coin flip plus better GOTV, great position for them.
Yeah, right on time, Mark.
However, that wasn't on time.
That wasn't, or maybe it was.
You know, one thing I would just say that I think a lot of the East Coast elite press have gotten wrong. Democrats can walk and chew gum at the same time. She's not just on Trump is a fascist message, which has a lot of appeal to the base, has a lot of appeal to college educated voters, but is lukewarm to blue collar voters. She has an economic track as well. And that blue collar guy, that is, in my opinion, a great economic ad and drawn a great contrast. So it's really, she can walk and chew gum at the same time. And so can the party, and she has the resources to do that. So we have a 2-track strategy, and I think it's very important that both tracks get attention.
Yeah, well, I'd say 3 tracks, right? It's abortion rights, it's the economy, and it's Trump is a fascist. So, Linda, I want to read you a paragraph that's like right at the end.
Mark is back, so he should finish his thoughts since we didn't hear
before he goes away again.
There it is. Mark, what were you going to say? Right on time, and then
we're right on time, right on track, perfectly timed for the campaign. I mean, I think it just reflects that not only are supporters and voters victims of confirmation bias, but so are media outlets. Just sort of using whatever information they can to write the story and the headlines that they got yesterday. Now, I'm anxious to hear Celinda's report, though, because I have some strong feelings about gender and its role in this election.
Okay, so, we're going to get to that after one more thing.
Speaking of confirmation bias, I'm so excited to hear Celinda.
We're going to get to that, and I want to bring up one thing, which was late in the New York Times story, like the second to last paragraph. Celinda, I'd love your analysis of this paragraph. Democrats, even at the top levels of the Harris campaign, worry that the party is not correctly modeling the electorate in its polling, repeating a misstep that led Mr. Biden's campaign aides to overestimate his strength in the final days of the 2020 race. So people at the top level of the Harris campaign are saying to the New York Times, our models might be off and underestimating Trump. How does that paragraph appear?
Well, I think every pollster who is being honest, and I would certainly say this for us, every pollster is worried that they have the turnout model right. And 85% of the polls, the private polls, all of the private polls that are done by the campaign, and 85% of the polls that we're doing, for example, the press will never see. They're never been made public. And in our own firm, we're doing 2 turnout model scenarios now when we deliver data. We're saying if the turnout is this, this is what will happen. If the turnout is this, this is what will happen. There are definitely, in my opinion, there are definitely Trump voters and Harris voters who are probably not in our polls. And there's going to be a surge on both sides, a surge of young women and unmarried women and pro-choice women, and a surge of blue-collar guys and younger blue-collar guys in particular. So I think every pollster across the board is struggling the most with what is the turnout really going to be. And that was a problem in 2016, a problem in 2020, and a problem in 2024. And it's a bipartisan problem.